All right, in this video, we're going to work on the following problem. It says use the model view controller pattern. And again, that's taken loosely. Um, Write a JavaFX application that allows the user to input a value in miles, converts the value to feet, and then displays the results to the user. The data entered by the user should be stored in the model class. Okay, so first off, I'm going to start with scene builder, and I'm just going to use a pane as the root component here. And then I'm going to want a label. A text view, or text field rather, and a text area. And on the label, I'm going to just put miles. And then the text field is going to be right up next to that label. Okay, and so that's what it should look like. Then what I'm going to do is I need to control this text field and this text area. So I am going to give the text field an FX ID. I'm going to call it miles field. And then I am going to set its on action as handle miles field. All right. And so that is the method that's going to get called when a user is in this text field and presses the enter key. And then the text area, I want to control it as well. So text area, I'm going to give it an FX ID of text area. And that should do it on the setup. I am going to need to specify a controller. So I'm going to call it miles to feet controller. And set that value. So, and then save this. And I'm going to go to show sample controller skeleton and then save as miles to feet controller, and that's the right directory to save that in. Okay, so all of that looks good. And so it should be showing up here now. So I'm going to compile the controller, and all of that looks good. Next up, I'm going to work on the main app. So that's import javafx.application.application, import javafx.stage.stage, import javafx.scene.scene. Import javafx.scene.layout.pane. Import javafx.fxml.fxml.loader. And import java.io.io.exception. Right, then the class header. And it's going to extend application. An application has one abstract method that needs to be implemented. That's public void start stage. And inside there, I will set up that root component, which is a pane. And it's fxml loader.load, and then get class dot get resource, and that is the fxml file, miles to feet fxml dot fxml. All right, so that sets up the root component, and then it's create a scene off of that. I'm going to call it scene and pass root to that. And then stage.setScene, tell the window to display the scene. And set a title. And then stage.show. So I'm going to compile that. And so this is going to throw a checked exception, IO exception, so it's subject to the catch or declare rule. Just to keep things simple, I'm just going to declare it for right now, IO exception. So put the throws clause up on this start method, and that should take care of that. All right, and my controller is compiled, so it should go, yeah. Okay, so all that's hooked up and seems to be working now. Okay, next up is go into the controller, and what I want to do is when the user enters a value into that miles text box and presses the enter key while in there, what I want it to do is first off fish that out. So that would be milesfield.getText, and then store that in a variable. It has to come out as a string. So I'm going to call it miles string. Now I need to make some calculation with that, so I'm going to need to convert it. I'm going to convert it to a double named miles, and that would be double dot parse double miles string. Okay, then I would make the calculation. Oops, actually, yeah, that's fine. So I'm converting to feet, so that would be 5,280 times the number of miles, because there's 5,280 feet in a mile. And then the last thing I need to do is to display that in the text area. So that'd be text area dot set text, and then what it is that I want to have in there. So that would be string dot format. So I can format the text, and then so I'll have some message. There are blank feet in blank miles. Okay, and I need to tell it where those are coming from. So the first one is feet, and the second one is miles. And I want to do some formatting on that, so I'll put a comma as the thousand separator, and then I'll round the values to 2 decimal places. All right, so compile that, and everything looks okay, but we'll see how it is when we run it. And so the little test case that we have is, actually we don't have a test case here. So let's just try 1, see how that goes. And let's try 8.5. Yeah, that looks okay. All right, so it seems to be working. So basically we have gotten everything here pretty well, except for the model parts. So let's take a look at what they say. It says, not a lot. The data entered by the user should be stored in the model class. So it's kind of up for us to decide. But there's not a lot of data, right, in this app that's flying around here. It's basically just miles and feet. There is one other issue, right, and that is that we need to handle any issue here that comes up with the user. entering non-numeric values in here. So if I enter a non-numeric value, you can see I get all these errors, which I do not want to have happen. So what I'm going to do, and you can see we get a number format exception, right? That is under, if you trace back through here, you can see it's on line 17 of the controller. So line 17 is where we do that conversion, right? So when the user enters non-numeric text in there, and we ask double.parse double to convert it to a double so we can perform this multiplication, then that causes an issue. Java doesn't know what to do, so it just kind of gives up. So what we're going to do is put that in a try block. And then we're going to catch that number format exception. And what we'll do is just to set a message in the text area, invalid input. And we could pop up an alert to the user or whatever else, but for right now, we're just gonna give some kind of message to the user. And then the other thing is if I just leave it like this, they'll get the message, but then this code right here could potentially cause some other issues, right? Because it's not, this variable miles is not initialized properly, and then here we're using it as if it were initialized properly. So in the case that we have invalid input, we're just going to return. In other words, we're going to end this method early, so this these statements down here are not executed. And so all that looks pretty good so far, except, right, we get this error, cannot find symbol. And that's caused by putting this variable declaration for miles inside of this try block. So the scope now is limited to that block, which we don't want. So we talked about how to fix that before. Just declare it before you go into that try and catch block. And I'm just going to initialize it to 0 and then get rid of the declaration here. So that should fix that issue. So there we go. And now, oops, when we run the app and enter some letters in here, you can see we just get invalid input. We don't get the wall of green text down here in the errors. And then it's still working correctly for the previous cases that we had. Okay. All right. So again, we've got pretty much everything down except for the model part. Looking back at what they say about the model, it says the data entered by the user should be stored in the model class. So not a lot of direction there, but we don't have a lot of data to deal with anyway. We basically have miles and feet. That's pretty much it, right? So, and we can basically recover everything else after that. You could have the string that you want to display down in the text area. You could have that as well, but I'm just going to go with miles and feet right here. Right now, the data is not really stored anywhere. As soon as this method is over, those values are gone, and they only really reside as text, right, in that text box there. So the model, remember, is the data manager, and so what we're going to do is create another class, miles to feet model, and we're going to have fields for feet and miles. And then set methods for those. see, something's not right here. It should be void. So those are void types there. Still something's not right, but we'll just go ahead and type in the name to figure out and compile it and see what we get here. Oh, I forgot the class keyword. That's what it is. Okay, so we have some place to store feet and miles. We have some mechanism for getting that data into the model from the controller. So we would just call this set feet and set miles when that's updated. Okay, so that's basically the container for our data. We don't really have to have any other complicated things in there because after all, this is a really simple app. So we're just sort of practicing, how we would do this to build up to more complicated apps. So over here in the controller, what we'll need to do is to send that data over in there. And so what we need is a reference, right, for that model. So inside the controller class, it has to have some way to get in contact with an model object. So I am going to make a field up here, miles to feet model, and I'm just going to call it model there. And then, so this will have some access to the model. And then when when everything is updated, that's down here, right? Once I get to this line right here, I'll have a valid value for both miles and feet. I'm going to store that in the model. So set feet to feet and set miles to miles there. Okay, and so when I go to run that, I'm going to have a problem. So here, right, I could do 8.5 miles, hit enter. You're going to see a lot of errors right here, and you're going to get this one. Cannot invoke miles to feet model set feet double because this model is null, right? So what's going on, right, is that we set up this field, but we never initialized it, right? And normally you would do that from the constructor, but you can add a constructor here and initialize it, and you'll still have the same issue because of the way this FXML, right, is being injected into the controller and all that. There's no place for us to call the controller the way we have it set up. Now you probably could do it some other way, but the way that we're going to take care of that issue is to add an initialize method. So this one you have to mark with the @fxml tag, and so it's public. No, it's just, yeah, I guess that's fine. Public void initialize. And then inside here, right, what you would do is actually call the constructor, right, for the miles to feet model. And that calls the constructor in here and gets things set up. We are just going with the default constructor here, but you could add one right in here, but nothing says in this problem says that it's required. You could set this up multiple different ways as well. All right, so that should take care of that problem. So here we go. When I enter 8.5, right, it displays that text, and now that data is put into the model. Now it's really hard to see that the way this is set up. Or what you could do to check that, right, is just you could add a toString here if you wanted to, and then you could print out the model and see what was in there. That's a good way to check that if you're not sure that yours is working correctly. Also, one thing here is when I change the values, right, then that stuff in the model is updated. So now miles will be 1 and 5,280, right? will be the value, or 5,280 would be the value for feet, and 1 will be the value for miles. Those previous values, 8.5 and whatever the number for feet was, those are no longer stored in the model. Those are gone forever. So another thing you could do is, if you wanted to remember more than just the past, what's currently in there, you wanted to remember the model to keep track of previous values, you could put in an array list or write the data to a file or a database or something like that. But again, this problem, the way it's stated, doesn't really say anything about that. We just now have this separate class that deals with controlling the data. We weren't given a whole lot of directions about how to do that, so in this case, we don't really need to worry about it for test purposes and those sorts of things. Okay, I think that is it for this one.